Hey home bakers, a focaccia is that kind of flat, puffy bread in a tray with dimples on the top. It's light and fluffy, not dense and cakey. It's yet another no-knead bread recipe, just like the baguettes in video number 182. Roll it! Hello to you and welcome back to the Bake with Jack YouTube channel. Today's recipe comes lifted straight out of my book, Bread Every Day. It's on page 109 if you want to follow along. It's going to take you roughly 4 to 4 3/4 hours. Today we're going to do the big focaccia in a tray with rosemary and sea salt on the top. And then next week we're going to explore 4 of my favourite toppings. We're going to do a little pie tins just like this. Yes, cut to the table. First, into my large mixing bowl, I'm going to put the liquid part of the recipe. 380 grams of liquid in total for quite a wet dough. We're going to use half water and half milk, both at room temperature, which today in my kitchen is 21 degrees C, which is 69.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Using milk brings another extra level of fluffiness and softness to the final bread. If you're vegan or dairy free or whatever, feel free to use a whole 380 grams of water. Next, into the water, I'm going to put yeast. I'm using 7 grams of dry fast action yeast, or you can use 12 grams of fresh yeast. Pop it into the water, whisk it up slightly, just enough to soften. Next, I'm going to add 500 grams of strong white bread flour and 8 grams of salt. Using your dough scraper, mix everything together till it just starts coming together into a dough. At that point, add your olive oil, 20 grams, and mix that in too. This is a no-knead recipe. We're not going to knead it, so we need to make sure that it's mixed up really well at this stage. No oily patches, no wet patches, no dry patches, no nothing. Get your hand in there if you need to give it a little bit of welly, just to bring everything together into a cohesive dough. Next, you could cover your dough with a Bake with Jack proving cloth, but I don't at this stage because it's an olive oil dough and we're going to make it oily and add oil as we go along. And so I don't want my cloth to get oily. I'm going to put a bowl on top, upside down. Your dough is going to rest here at room temperature for a period of time. And along that time, we're going to give it 3 periods of stretching and folding to build the structure that it needs to get as puffy as possible. This first rest lasts for 30 minutes, and 30 minutes later, here's what you're going to do. Take a little bit of olive oil and oil your work surface, just a little patch, and then sprinkle a little bit over the top of your dough as well. Spread it over your fingertips to make sure nothing sticks to anything. This is a really wet dough. It's going to get properly sticky if we don't employ tactical application of olive oil. Lift it out of your bowl with your dough scraper, upside down onto that oily patch, and commence fold number 1. Lift a piece of dough from one edge and flop it over the top like this. Then continue working your way around the dough, lifting a piece and folding over all the way around the edges. 10 to 12 folds should be enough this time to turn your mess of a dough into a nice, smooth and bouncy ball. Very, very pleasing. Pop it back into your bowl, upturn bowl back on the top and let it rest a second time. This time we're going to rest it for 45 minutes. If your kitchen is 21 degrees, the same as mine, you can follow this recipe pretty much exactly and you'll get exactly the results that I do in exactly the time that I do. If you're in a warmer place, things might be a little bit tricky. And let me explain why. While your dough rests, it's going to puff up. Okay, it will puff to a point and then get delicate and then start collapsing. What we are doing here, by placing these folds along that resting period, is intercepting the dough before it gets too delicate. Yes, it's puffy, but it's still got some strength. By folding it like this each time, we are tightening it back up, allowing it to take on more gas without it getting too puffy and collapsing. Does that make sense? If you are somewhere warmer, it's going to puff up faster and therefore you're in danger of getting to that delicate point. Then if you try and fold it, which you will lose the gas contained in it, which is a real shame. Your bread will still be nice, but instead of encapsulating that gas, you will be knocking it out effectively. After the 45-minute rest, we return to our dough and do pretty much exactly the same thing, only less. You can see here that our dough has inflated slightly. Oil the table again and turn your dough out upside down onto that oily patch. Make sure it doesn't stick to the table and do it again. 1 fold, turn, 2 folds, 3, 4, 5, 6. Roll it over and you're good to go. Now that mass of dough approaching that slightly delicate stage is re-strengthened so I can take on even more gas next time round. Pop it back into the bowl with an upturned bowl on the top again and rest it, this time for a further 45 minutes. For the third fold, we're going to do exactly the same thing, and this is where it really starts getting pleasing because you're starting to recognize the puffiness, the silkiness, the pillowiness that is arriving in our dough. Check this out. It's looking really, really responsive, really smooth, really silky and lovely. Gently and delicately tip your dough upside down onto that oil and begin to fold it up. Stretch it right out. 1 fold, 2, 3, or 4 this time, and the 5th one over. Yeah. Woo! Isn't this wonderful? That puffiness is what you have encapsulated all the way through the process, and that is what's going to make your focaccia puff up nicely in the oven and become a really nice, light and airy bread. At any point, if you feel like your dough is going to stick to yourself or your table, apply additional olive oil. You don't want it to snag into the bowl on its way out, so shimmy some down the edge if you need to. Just olive oil everywhere, because once it starts sticking to things, you're going to start pulling away your fingers and then you're going to lose the gas, and it's the same for the next part. The next rest before we put it into the tray is 30 minutes long. Put the lid back on the top and just leave it on the kitchen side for another 30 minutes. Get yourself a nice big baking tray. This one is 30 centimeters by 40 centimeters, and line it with a slice of parchment paper. Parchment paper, never ever grease proof, it will stick like crazy. Get yourself parchment paper, it's very important. A little drizzle of olive oil on your paper and wipe it around with your fingers to make sure your dough doesn't snag onto the paper when you tip it out. And just look at that puffy dough as if it couldn't get any puffier last time around. It's looking really, really lovely. Another bit of olive oil on the top just to make sure nothing sticks. Just kind of wipe it about, shimmy a scraper down the edge to get a bit of that oil underneath there so you can slide your dough out, causing the minimum trauma possible to the dough. We do not want to lose bubbles at this point. It'd be a real shame. Slide it out so it lands in your tray the same way up as what it is in the bowl. This stage, you can really tell it's going to make a light and fluffy bread already, right? You can just see it, you can just tell. Now, making sure it's not sticking to the paper at this stage. I'm going to take my fingertips and gently dimple the dough right down so I can feel the tray on the end of my fingertips. This is the first time we're going to do this. We're going to do this 2 times, okay? Don't stress out about spreading it the size of the tray, and don't smash it all down flat. Just gentle dimples with your fingers and allow the dough to go to where the dough wants to go to. Now I'm going to put it to one side for a minute while I make my topping, which is quite simply picked rosemary and olive oil. Get yourself some fresh rosemary, pick off those leaves into a bowl. Actually, I've got a bit of thyme here too kicking around, so I'm going to use that too. Drizzle a decent amount of olive oil in there, 4 to 5 tablespoons probably, and mix it all together. Now I'm going to take those herbs in the oil and just place a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit all over the top of our focaccia. Check this out. Let's linger here for a moment, shall we? It's lovely. Next, a second dimple with my fingertips. Take your time. Push your fingers deep into the dough. The idea is not to spread it to the size of the tray here, because if we did that, we'd probably lose a lot of the gas inside. Take the rest of the oil and drizzle it all over the top, creating these beautiful little dough, olive oil, herb puddles. This is going to soak into your dough and make it wicked tasty and translate all that flavour from the herbs right down deep into the bread. Now you're going to leave it here, let it puff up again for 45 minutes to an hour before you bake it. There's no need to cover it at this stage because it's got so much oil on the top, nothing ain't never going to dry out. Towards the end of the resting, preheat your oven to 200 degrees C. That's 425 degrees Fahrenheit, I think. Get a shelf in the middle and a deep tray on the floor of the oven. Half fill a kettle of water for making steam later. You know how it goes. And check this out. After that final rest, it is wicked puffy, really airy. Look at those bubbles, you know it's going to be good. All those little pools of herby oil have begun to make their way down into the bread dough. Lovely and silky and shiny, beautiful. Man. At this stage, click your kettle on to boil and get yourself some flaky sea salt like this. Season it all over. Don't crush it between your fingers. Keep those bits nice and big. Bring a bit of crunch to the surface later. Season it all over a little bit, but everywhere. Always put the salt on at this stage just before you go into bake, because if we did it earlier, it would suck the moisture out of the dough and then it would dissolve on the top and you'd lose those crispy little pieces. Get over to the oven, ready to go. Load your focaccia into the oven on that shelf. Pull that bottom tray out slightly and tip your boiling water carefully into that tray, making loads of steam. Shut the oven door and pop your timer on. Depending on your oven, your focaccia is going to take 30 to 40 minutes to bake properly. And the way to tell if it's done is if you slide a knife underneath and lift it up and have a little peep. You want it to be golden brown underneath to the middle, and then you know you're done. It's tricky, and all ovens are different. If you notice the top browning off too much or your herbs catching, turn the heat down to make sure it bakes through to the middle without scorching the top. A combination of the yeast giving its final push when it hits the heat of the oven and all of those bubbles that you've been looking after, re-strengthening, allowing the dough to take on more and more gas, all that entrapped bubbles, they grow, giving a massive oven spring in the oven just like this. That's what makes your focaccia light and puffy and airy and beautiful and delicious. And check this out, wonderfully golden on the top without burning those herbs. What a triumph. Remove it from the tray, taking the paper with it if you need to, straight onto a cooling rack. Remove that paper, else it will steam up and get soggy underneath, which is what we don't want, and pop it underneath. Finally, a last drizzle with fresh olive oil to bring some fresh olive oil flavour to the top to soak it in. The paper underneath will catch the drips and leave it there to cool for as long as possible, if you can. Look at that. All those little holes carry that flavour down deep into the bread dough. Man, delicious. When it's cool enough, give it a nice slice down the middle, exposing that beautiful crumb texture. Check it out. We've got consistently inconsistent bubbles inside, which is what I absolutely love. Check it out. It's wicked bouncy, really lovely. You can tear it into chunks if you want, cut it into triangles, make big, massive slices like this. And as it's getting older, you can get those slices and put them on the char grill with a bit extra olive oil if you want and a rub of garlic. Make a wicked little toast. Delicious, crispy crust on the outside, soft, moist interior. Oh my goodness, is there anything else to say? Your focaccia is a blank canvas for any flavours that your heart desires. And next week, I'm going to show you 4 of my favourite toppings. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a lot out of it. There are thousands of ways to make a focaccia, but this is how I make mine. I will put a link underneath for the recipe, which I'll put on the blog. And also, of course, it is in my book, Bread Every Day. You can buy this from bakewithjack.co.uk/shop if you want a signed copy or a bundle from me, and also retailers all over. I'll link them up underneath. Waterstones, Amazon. If you're overseas, Blackwell, ship it for free. Go get your copy of Bread Every Day. Thank you very much for being here, and I'll see you very soon for another one. Bye-bye.